Right. Okay. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Skaife. I am the current serving Ravenmaster at Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress, the Tower of London. In fact, I am a yeoman warder. I'm one of currently 30 yeoman warders that live and work inside the walls of the Tower of London. And I invite you all this evening to, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you may come from, to my home. This is my home. This is where I live at the Tower of London. You can see behind me my bookshelf. And I'm actually tucked into the northern side of the outer walls of the Tower of London. So if you've ever walked around the Tower of London, you look at the big wall outside and you see all the arrow loops or arrow slits. Actually, one of them's just behind the door that I have here. And so that's looking into my living room. We do have some that look into other places that I'm not going to mention. So don't look too closely into the arrow loops from outside, all right? So why am I here tonight? Well, for my sins, I wrote a book called The Ravenmaster, My Life with the Ravens at the Tower of London a couple of years ago now. And I've been talking about it ever since, really. I look after the Ravens. In fact, my full title is Yeoman Warder Christopher Skaife of Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress, the Tower of London, and a member of the Sovereign's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard Extraordinary. I have what is commonly known as one of the oddest jobs in Britain. Odd may be the best, definitely. And I am going to talk a little bit about myself for a little while, because it's mentioned in the book. It was something that I didn't really want to go in the book, but there were so many people that thought it was fascinating. That's why we included it in. So what you see now, and I hope everybody can see the screen. Can you put your hands up, Catherine? Can you see the screen? Can you see it? Can you all see it? Good, good, good. Right, so you see the two uniforms that the yeoman body, we are the oldest formed body of men in the world, both men and women, I should say. Even, I claim, older than the Vatican Guard, or they dispute that, but we're older than them. So you see two uniforms. One I'm wearing now, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, which is my everyday dress, which is what we wear because it's comfortable and doesn't cost as much money as the one on the left-hand side of your screen, which is our ceremonial dress. We wear that on ceremonial occasions. I have an 8-foot spear called a pike or partisan. I wear tights with flowers in them, a splendid tunic with breeches underneath, and you see a Tudor ruff around my neck. Now, this uniform that you see, the red uniform, ceremonial uniform, dates back to a time of King Henry VIII. And I don't know what King Henry VIII was thinking when he put a ruff around our necks to push our heads up, because they are so uncomfortable. Goodness gracious me. But the jacket is all handmade. It's got 71 meters of gold braid in it, which makes it very, very heavy. And it weighs about 10 kilograms, just a jacket on its own. So we don't wear them all the time because they are so expensive. And they're quite cumbersome. So what you see on the right-hand side, my uniform is my everyday dress. You can see it's got the letter in E and R, which stands for Elizabeth Regina, Seconde, Elizabeth, our Queen II. So my boss, if you like. So where do I live? Well, I live in this building here. This is my home. They say every man's home is his castle, and in my case, actually, it certainly is. So this is the Tower of London, one of 20 towers that encompass the White Tower, the one in the middle. It was built by William the Conqueror in around 1078-ish. It took 20 years to complete. So William the Conqueror invaded England in 1066. He spent many years suppressing the people of England. But as he did so, going around the country, he decided to build fortresses for his lords, and they impressed and overawe people. And so one of the fortresses he built was on the River Thames, the northern side, which protected London, the city of London, from people coming into the river. So this was built by William the Conqueror. He didn't actually see it finished but around that time. So what has the Tower of London got to do with me and Ravens? Well, it was a prison. It's been a public records office. It's been a royal menagerie for 600 years, a zoo. It's been a place where we tortured a few people, we executed a few people there. And so it's also been a home for residents for about nearly 1,000 years, and royal residents for 500 years, although no royal family lives in it anymore. So it's had loads and loads of uses. And we, the Yeoman Warders, all 30 of us, are the guardians of the Tower of London. We are responsible for day-to-day happenings. Now, in the past, we looked after the prisoners and kept the tower safe, along with the crown jewels, which are here as well. But nowadays, we look after the visitors that come in, and we are, in effect, the subject matter experts of the Tower of London, and we're the storytellers. That's all we are. We are storytellers. None of us consider ourselves as historians, but we are storytellers. So we tell the stories that have been passed down from generation to generation of yeoman warders about the things that happened at the Tower of London, so stories. And we really can date our stories back to this gentleman here, Henry VII, and the Battle of Bosworth Field. So it was the last battle of the War of the Roses between the Yorkists and the Lancastrians. Henry VII won, defeated Richard III, and eventually he became King of England, King Henry VI. But he died. And when he died, his body came to the Tower of London, along with some of his guards. And his guards were us. And when his body was moved off to Westminster, some of the older guards stayed at the Tower of London to keep it safe. And that's why we have the yeoman warders of the Tower of London who work and live at the Tower, but we also have the yeomen of the guard that you see sometimes in Buckingham Palace working from there. But it is this man here really that started us off, Henry VI. So there we are. There's a fine body of men at the Tower of London. This is what we look like in our modern day dress by Henry VIII. And if you want to spot where I am, I'm on the right-hand side, and I'm the shortest one, somewhere towards the back. You can see me, little short, that one at the back there, okay? I'm just going to go back slightly. Let's see, there we go, okay. In 1826, the Duke of Wellington, the famous victor of the Battle of Waterloo, a famous wartime and prime minister here as well. He was the constable of the Tower of London for many years, the man who looked after the Tower of London. 1826, he decreed that only meritorious gallant sergeant majors from the British Army can come and be yeoman warders at the Tower of London, which effectively meant that he only wanted upstanding gentlemen that had served with him on his battlefields. And that's when we started to become military men here at the Tower of London, yeoman warders from his battlefields. He had taken people in that probably didn't have many relatives or anywhere to go. And so he took his old sergeant majors in as a community, if you like, at the Tower of London. And we become the yeoman warders of the Tower. And you can see this is a picture, a really early picture actually, of yeoman warders from 1873. This is standing near the Byward Tower, near the entranceway. I'm going to show you a picture now of yeoman warders in 1890. You can see there's been very little change in the yeoman warders from then to there. So these would have seen wars like Crimea and stuff like that. And this is us now. I always love putting this picture up because it reminds me of the Reservoir Dogs. Have you seen the picture of the Reservoir Dogs and them all going into, anyway, and there's us going. In fact, in this picture here, we're going to meet Her Majesty the Queen at some stage, and we're just going to work. So you can see it's all going into work. And there's me with my beard at the time. I was sporting a beard and going in. So what do we do? What do we do at the Tower of London? Apart from being storytellers and the subject matter experts, if you like, we also guard the tower. So this is the yeoman warders escorting Her Majesty the Queen when she arrived at the Tower of London to see the poppies that was put in the moat, and two, to open up some works that were taking place in the chapel. So I think I'm on the left-hand side again, a short one on the left, on the right-hand side, walking just behind the Queen's car, which is in the front. So that's what we do. We guard Her Majesty the Queen. We are the Queen's bodyguard. We do ceremonial duties as well. This is a ceremony called the Constable's installation. This is when we have a new constable every 5 years. And you see the gentleman in the front, that's the Chief Young Warder, and he has a key on that velvet pillow. And it is a golden key. And it is the key to the Tower of London that we present to the incoming constable of the Tower of London. And you can just see me kind of in the corner there, just kind of standing to attention as the key passes. So that's one of the ceremonies that we do. That's a ceremony that took place outside of the Tower of London. That was a military ceremony, and both myself and my colleague on the other side were part of the regiment at the time. I think that's the consul of Denmark at the time. So we go outside and we do ceremonies as well, as us looking very stern and important there, although. But I'm going to show you this picture because this is really where it all starts. So I've talked about the yeoman warders, who we are, what we do at the Tower of London, what we dress like, and who started us off. But this picture here is me, and it's me as a young boy. I think I'm about 12 or 13-year-old. This is a school trip to London. I used to live in Dover, in Kent, which is the southern end of the UK. And this is a school trip that I went on. This is Trafalgar Square, and those who live in the UK or have been here before can remember that Trafalgar Square was full of thousands of pigeons. And you can see me with some, obviously, some pigeon feeding one of the pigeons there and looking very intently at these birds. And they fascinated me then. And it's kind of gone on with me throughout my life, I suppose. I was fascinated by these birds, and every time I went to a zoo or somewhere, I fell in love with nature. I fell in love with animals. I joined the military, and I'll show you a military. I'm not going to talk too much about my military career tonight because it's long and sometimes strange. But I'm going to show you three pictures. I'm going to show you the one on the left-hand side was me as a young boy. I joined the military at 16 years of age, just turned 16. And I think in that picture, I'm sporting a black eye and a cut arm. I think the other guy came off worse, but I was a bit of a rogue. It was either for me as a young boy, the military, and my mum dragged me to the Army Careers Office, or prison. That was it for me, really. And so I joined the military, and it was a fabulous decision that I made in my life, because I had a long and a fantastic career in the military. During my military career, I served as a drum major. You can see the picture in the center there. Is me in my finery as a drum major. Now, a drum major is the person that walks in front of a band or a corps of drums and waves a big stick around, beating people out the way. So that's what I've done as part and parcel of my job. But I was also an infantry soldier, and you can see the picture on the right-hand side is the very last picture of me taken before I left the army, some 24 and a half years later. So the very first picture, one of my first pictures, on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, look at the difference. Look what the military done to me over that period of time. They ruined me, they destroyed me. But I had a fabulous time in the military. And there are a couple of random pictures that I've put in here of me whilst I was serving in the military. I think the large one on the left-hand side is me serving in Belize with a couple of my colleagues. I'm the one leaning on the Land Rover on the left-hand side, the one smoking a cigarette. I smoked at the time. The top one is me in the center in Cyprus somewhere. The bottom one, that's me as a drum major, and that was in Portugal. So I had a fantastic career, got all around the world, served as a drum major, a military man, a machine gunner. But that's all I'm going to say about my military career. Now I'm going to start talking about the Ravens. Everybody with me still so far? Okay, right. I joined the body of young warders in 2005 after a military career. I had no idea what I wanted to do once I come out of the military, as many people who come out of the military have no idea what they want to do. And one day I was working with the Territorial Army just before I left, and the old caretaker come up to me one day and goes, "Chris," he says, "You love history." He says, "You're quite boring." He says, "Why don't you become a yeoman warder at the Tower of London?" And I had no idea what a yeoman warder was. I knew the Tower of London. I didn't know that there was people that lived there, and I certainly didn't know anything about the birds of the Tower of London, the ravens. So I applied, and luckily I was one of 132 people that managed to get the job. There was only two applicants, and I managed to get the job. In fact, I wasn't even qualified to get the job, because to be a yeoman warder, you have to have done a minimum of 22 years with the rank of a warrant officer and have an exemplary military record. Well, in fact, I wasn't a warrant officer. I was only a colour sergeant, which is a rank down from a warrant officer. So I am only one of two yeoman warders here at the Tower of London that was a colour sergeant. They only accept colour sergeants on exceptional circumstances. So I'm quite pleased with that. Although I get told by the other yeoman warders that I'm not a sergeant major. Never mind. Anyway, this is me. This is one of the first photographs that was taken of me once I took over the Ravens. I took over the Ravens by default, really, and I joined the Raven team in 2006. And lots of people ask me, how did you join the Raven team from being a yeoman warder? Well, I was always fascinated with nature and the environment. I'm a passionate environmentalist and nature lover. And I was watching these large blackbirds hopping around the lawns. They fascinated me. The old Ravenmaster, a guy called Derek Coyle, come up to me one day, goes, "Chris," says, "boy," he says, "I think the ravens might like you." And I thought to myself, why did he call me boy for? I was 40 at the time. And how does he know that ravens might like me? Anyway, I was intrigued. He invited me down to the ravens enclosure. He took me down there. He shoved me in the enclosure one day with two massive ravens. One of them started walking along the perch towards me, and he cocked his head to one side, the raven, not the Ravenmaster. He looked at me with his beady eye, and it says, "Get out the enclosure." So I got out very quickly, and he goes, "Yes, the ravens like you." And so I tell everybody at the Tower of London that the ravens picked me rather than the other way round. For the simple reason, it's easier. But Derek was very canny. The old Ravenmaster was very canny. He was making sure that I wasn't scared around ravens. Ravens are awesome birds, and they're massive. And when you compare them to a crow, which I will do later on, they are much bigger than the crow, and they're awesome when you see them. Even today, walking around the tower, a lady came up to me and said, "Chris," he says, "the ravens are absolutely huge, aren't they?" And they are. They're awesome. And it's not until you actually see one up close that you realise how big they are. But this is Melina. This is her. I actually taught her to tie up my shoelaces rather than untie them. No? Okay. Yeah. But sadly, Melina's not with us anymore. You are going to see some pictures of her tonight. We lost Melina just before Christmas. I'll mention that on any questions that you want to ask me afterwards about Melina. But she was a great friend of mine, and sorely lost. There she is there, looking absolutely splendid. This was what it is about, these beautiful, magnificent, intelligent birds that are subject to myth and legend, not just at the Tower of London, but all around the world. And by watching these birds and observing them, they inspired me to learn more and learn as much as I possibly could about them, because they are quite unique. There is a legend, should the ravens leave the Tower of London, it will crumble to dust and a great harm will befall the kingdom. So I've been locked in the Tower of London over the last year, virtually on my own, with the birds to keep me company. So I've gone a little bit bird crazy, I can tell you. So how do I look after the birds? I'm going to try and explain to you. You can see here that there's this wonderful piece of artwork that was done for me, and I was just talking to Andrew, I think, about it earlier. These are the raven rules that I mention in my book. And I kind of stick to these rules as much as I possibly can when I'm working with the Ravens day in, day out, year in, year out. And I kind of made these up to pass them on to the other colleagues. I work with a team of 3 other. In fact, I've just taken on another young warder as a Raven assistant. So there's 4 of us now, including myself, which makes 5. And these rules kind of set me up for when I'm working with the Ravens. Do not hurry a Raven, because I learned from a really early age that if you want to go out at night time, and I write in the book about a story about I was going out on my birthday and it was raining and cold and wet and miserable. And anyway, to cut a long story short, for those of you that haven't read the book, do so. It talks about me getting stuck in a very wet hole with some very dead pigeons and missing my birthday treat with my wife. But it's a great story to be told. And that is why I wrote this in. Do not hurry Ravens, because if they know that you're in a hurry, they will muck you around. Do not attempt to change the pecking order. Ravens are very, very, they're a bit of a gang, really, to be honest with you. They have their leaders and they're kind of their followers. And so I write this in. Don't change their pecking order. Let them do what they want to do when they need to do it on their terms. If I try to change something, they will just muck me around. Do not try to cut corners. Yeah. I talk about one story where I tried to get 2 ravens into an enclosure one time, and they didn't go in, and it just caused absolute chaos. So don't cut corners. Remain calm at all times. That's something that's really, really difficult to do when you're desperate to go out with your friends and it's pouring hard with rain. And yeah, they just look at you, and I just know what's going through their minds. They're just looking at you and going, "I'm gonna muck you around tonight, Ravenmaster." Allow the ravens to follow the same routine every day. They are habitual. They are neophobic. They don't like change. Ravens hate change. You could sit a raven on your chair in your living room for the whole of its life and not do anything with it. It'd be quite happy to sit there and watch the world go by. You would never stop it pooing on your floor. So I don't expect you to do that, but don't change their routines. They're very habitual. They love routine. Okay, so there's the pecking order. This is done in all gold paint, and I wanted to put it on there because it's such a beautiful piece of artwork. I wear a badge. I am the only Ravenmaster I know of officially in the world. It's an appointment, it's not a rank. And so I wear a badge. I have it on my sleeve here. And you can see the picture of it here. It's got the head of Bran. So those of you know the story of Bran and Branwen, and we've just named a baby female raven, Branwen, at the Tower of London by public vote, I might add. Thank goodness they didn't call it Boaty McRavenface. So we didn't give anybody the chance to do that, I can assure you. So this is Bran. His head is poking out of the crown, which represents the monarchy. Of course, should the ravens leave the Tower of London, the kingdom will fall. And a great harm will befall our kingdom, the monarchy. And then the laurel wreath represents authority. But I say the authority is not me over the ravens, it's the ravens over me. Because they've taught me lots of things, life skills over the years that I've been looking after them. So how did the ravens get to be at the Tower of London? Why is the Tower of London associated with ravens? And once I'd done the research for the book, I came across lots of really interesting stuff and some not so interesting stuff. But one of the photographs, I tried to find out when the ravens first appeared in literature to the Tower of London. Okay, we know of the stories and the myths and the legends and that. There are quite a few different variant stories about ravens in the Tower of London. And there were ravens in London up until the early part of the 19th century. But they were kind of wiped out. They were seen as vermin up until the 1830s. They were virtually gone in London, and so there were no ravens around. So how did the ravens at the Tower of London stay here? Well, they didn't. If you look at the picture on the left-hand side, it's a picture of two ravens hopping around a little girl. Her name is Prue. This dates to around about 1883. And this is the first picture that we have of ravens connected to the Tower of London in the Tower's history. So you would think that the legends date back a long time, but actually the connection of ravens to the Tower of London is really Victorian, and I'll explain why. So there's little Prue there. It was wrote in a children's magazine at the time. The Yeoman Water, she's clean onto the Yeoman Water there. These ravens, these scary birds are hopping around her. And she says to her parents in a poem that she in the book that these ravens are peculiar to the Tower of London. Of course they are, because there were no ravens in London at that period of time. In around about 1864-ish, around about that time, a site was mentioned in the Tower of London, a scaffold site, which everybody knows as the place of execution of Queen Anne Boleyn, Queen Catherine Howard, Lady Jane Grey, and a few others as well. And that was put in during the period of the Victorian period by Albert on the request of her mother, his mother, Queen Victoria, to commemorate those who lost their lives. And of course, it was the Victorian period, and we had a fascination with lots of things, Gothic revivalism. We had a fascination with death and morbidity. And so this scaffold site was placed in to commemorate those who lost their lives. Nowadays, when you come to the Tower of London, it has a wonderful glass pillow with on a table, and you can walk around it, and it has the names of those who lost their lives there. But during the Victorian period, it was just a brass plaque. And so during that period of time also, there were more and more visitors coming to the Tower of London. And it was the job of the Yeoman Warder, who had been security at the Tower of London for many, many years, to show these visitors around. And they were all ex-military men from 1826, when the Duke of Wellington decreed that an emeritus gallant sergeant majors for the British Army, for Yeoman Warders, and they was on a meagre pension, and they didn't get paid much. So to enhance their payment at the Tower of London, they decided to take on guided tours. Now, we have been doing guided tours since the Elizabethan period, but not really recognised guided tours. So Tower authorities said the Yeoman Warders could do the guided tours and talk about the history. Of course, the Tower of London associated with death and torture and punishment. I'm going to try and do it as best I can here on the little screen that I got, and try and explain how the ravens came about being here. You can imagine, and I need you to imagine, standing at the front gate of the Tower of London during the mid-Victorian period, really looking forward to going into the Tower of London and learning about all the terrible things that happened there. And an old yeoman ward would come out on his stick. And he'd come out, and he'd lean and look at you. So who wants to come into the Tower of London? There might be 20 or 30 people there. And they all nod in anticipation. And right before we go in, says, I need a shilling from you. You take a shilling, let everybody put it in his pocket. Follow me. And then he'd open the door and walk in. He'd tell stories about the Byward Tower and the drawbridge and the menagerie and the moat when it was filled with water. And then he'd get right down to Traitors' Gate, and he'd stop there before he went into the inner ward. He'd say, right, does anybody want to know about the Queens of England that came through Traitors' Gate? And everybody would nod, excited by this old yeoman warder, ex-military man. He'd say, yeah, before we tell any more stories, I need another penny from you. So he'd take a penny, stick it in his pocket. He'd say, follow me. Anyway, that's what happened. He went all the way around the tower, telling stories about the Tower of London. Of course, if you imagine a gentleman 2,000 years ago, sitting in front of a campfire, talking to the children around there, the village elder, talking about stories that happened long ago. That's what we done. And of course, the stories got bigger and bigger and bigger, because he wanted his pockets to get fuller and fuller and fuller, until he got to the scaffold site where Queens of England were executed. And he got there, and there was just a brass plaque on the floor that said scaffold site. And so he wanted to finish off there and make a bit more money. So they thought, what a really good idea. What reminds us of death and all things dying? Ah, yeah, ravens. That's a good idea. We'll get some in. We'll trim up their flight feathers. We'll sit them round. And then we can say, and this is the site of execution. These ravens here, these ravens that you see now, they are the souls of the dearly departed. These ravens were here when Queen Anne Boleyn lost her head, this very spot. Give us another penny. And that's why the ravens came to the Tower of London. They were brought in as a Victorian fancy, we believe, to enhance visitor attraction. And they've stayed with us ever since. So there's no historical evidence that ravens were at the Tower of London before 1883. But I challenge anybody to try and find some information out. And I am working on some more information, and there's yet more to come of that. So that's how the ravens got here at the Tower of London. And I've been here ever since. But that's quite a long time. So ravens, there's the execution site. That was before the glass table went in. You can see the ravens there having a bit of a group meeting before it opens to the public. A group of ravens is commonly known as an unkindness for ravens. No. A murder of crows. Okay, I can live with that. An unkindness of ravens? No. A conspiracy of ravens. Look at them ravens on that picture. They are planning to steal the crown jewels without a shadow of a doubt. So an unkindness of ravens is what they're commonly known as. A conspiracy is what I like to call them. So this is their enclosure. This was put in about 5 or 6 years ago now. I designed it along with some architects to enhance the ravens' time here. Before this enclosure went in, the ravens were ushered into night boxes. I didn't think that was the right thing to do. Not that it made any difference to them, because they are very neophobic and they don't like change. But this allows me, I call it an enclosure, not a cage or an aviary or anything like that. It's purely for nighttime purposes. So the ravens are out and about all over the place during the daytime, or first light to last light. And at night time, to keep them safe during the evening time when I'm in bed myself, I bring them into this enclosure. It is their home, like us. When we've had a hard day's work, we want to watch a bit of telly, put our feet up, have something to eat. This is exactly what the ravens do. And they come to bed on themselves. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they sleep out on the walls. I don't mind if they're up high, because there's no predators are going to get, no fox predators, I should say. They're going to get up high. Little Georgie, she sleeps outside most of the time nowadays. So I allow them to come in and come out as they will. I don't force them to go into their enclosure. But it's a wonderful place. I feed them in there twice a day, first light in the morning and last light in the evening time, or a little bit before. We used to throw the food out in and around the tower many years ago. We lost most of it to seagulls. The seagulls at that period of time were the fattest seagulls in London, because they always knew when they was going to get fed by the Ravenmaster. I remember sitting in the bloody tower box. We got a little box in the bloody tower, sitting there one day, and I just fed liver the ravens. And this lady was standing next to me, talking to me, and a seagull had obviously stolen this piece of liver and dropped it out of its mouth as it flew over, which then decided to slap the lady's face on the forehead and then slip down her face. She looks like something out of a horror movie. It was awful. And from that day onwards, really, I decided that it wasn't a good idea to feed the ravens, because they are omnivores. They're carrion, they eat meat. They eat lots of things depending on the environment they live in. But then we had too many incidents like that, where the seagulls were dropping food on people. That's not really nice if you pay your money to come to the Tower of London and end up with a liver face. So we stopped that. So now I feed them in the enclosure. You may see me chucking some biscuits out nowadays. I do chuck out biscuits soaked in blood. I'll show you some of them in a minute. There's a raven staring at you. This is Melina. I love this picture of her. It's just. I take lots of photographs of the ravens and I put them on social media for the pure fact I try to capture their character. And they all have different characters, like us humans. We have different characters. They have different characters. They have different emotions. They have happiness and sadness and anxiety and depression and everything that we have as humans. Ravens have emotions as well. And that's what I've learned over the years. They've taught me that they're not just a bird. They're a bird with substance. As like many of our animals around the world, they have emotions too. And I think I've captured her going, get that camera out my face, you. I used to keep a raven over here. This is the Queen's house. This was built as a wedding present for Queen Anne Boleyn. That's what us yeoman warders tell everybody. But Anne Boleyn was beheaded in 1536. This was built in 1540. So if a yeoman warder tells you that this was built as a wedding present for Queen Anne Boleyn, it might have been, but she never got to stay in it. That's for sure. It's lived in by the Constable of the Tower of London with his family. He's the man in charge, if you like. It's guarded by a soldier, as you can see there. And it used to be a place where we kept ravens as well. There is a little enclosure. There it is there. It's a little night box. It's a remnant from the Second World War, or just after the Second World War. Melina stayed in there for some time. She was certainly staying in there when I wrote the book. I don't use it anymore. I'm not going to get rid of it. It's a nice little hospital enclosure if I should need it, but it's not used at the moment. I use all the ravens in the enclosure where they are now. It's much, much more better for them. But we used to keep ravens there. In fact, that goes down into a coal cellar in the basement of the Queen's house. So a coal cellar down inside it. And the ravens, just after the Second World War, used to go into that window there and go down and sit on the coal cellar. And that's, I tell children, that's why ravens are black. That's terrible, isn't it? Anyway, I'll move on. They don't get any better. I say, what do ravens eat? Well, they eat a conglomeration of foods. I have changed what they eat over the years. Before my time, we used to buy the meat from Smithfield's meat market. It was mainly offal, heart, liver, and other bits of gory stuff, which I would have to come up and spend hours cutting up, like in a butcher's place, if you imagine my store, covered in blood. It was awful. It was horrible, and it wasn't really that good for the ravens. So I changed their food to more protein-based foods, and they have a much better diet nowadays. And when you see the ravens, they have really glossy feathers, and all the feathers are different in shades and stuff like that. And this is one of our ravens tucking into a nice rat. I hope there's no one on here that is squeamish, because if you are, that's a raven just wiping its beak after tucking into a heart. Anyway, I'll move on. They also hurt themselves, of course. That's ravens have learned how to pull out the plastic in bins, take out what they want. They will eat what they want and leave the rest of it on the floor for the cleaners to clean up, much to the annoyance of the cleaners. But they'll come and steal your sandwiches as well. So if you're eating your sandwich on a bench, and I see it so many times, they make pincer movements around and steal your sandwiches and steal your crisps, and they'll steal they are complete opportunists, I should say. But they will help themselves to all the bin content as well. I used to get a little bit worried about it when they help themselves to bin contents, because I have before found stuff in there that actually is not very good for them. Bubble gum, cigarette butts, pills. But nowadays, I just look at the ravens and go, yeah, you're just not going to eat that. I don't know why humans eat it, but ravens just go, what is that? That's minging. That's really bad. Yep, I had one raven that likes crisps. Sadly, she's not here. This is Melina. She's been helping herself to Pringles. She loves Pringles. In fact, she could see a packet of Pringles through a bag. She can go and steal your Pringles, even if they haven't been unwrapped. She'll take off the plastic lid, or she could. She'll pop them, tip them out on the floor, take what she wants. She doesn't like the flavor. She'll wash that off, bury them, or eat them, as the case may be. And there she is, caught in the act, stealing a Pringle. Dun, dun. So they have a wonderful diet of stuff like mice, rats, chicks, quail, some red meats, some white meats, and biscuits soaked in blood. In fact, that was originally what we was going to call the title of the book, Biscuits Soaked in Blood. But if you Google that, then you get all sorts of weird and wonderful things come up, and the publishers thought that would be a really bad idea to call it Biscuits Soaked in Blood. I don't quite know where it would fit on any bookshelf. So we call it the Ravenmaster, which is more appropriate. But I do soak blood. I do tell the public that it's small children that are left laying around at the end of the day, lost children. It's actually blood that I used to get from Smithfield's market. Nowadays I get it from the meats that I get. So they like it. I give them dog biscuits, cat biscuits, and boiled eggs, and any leftovers that especially during the lockdown period. I went round to those that were living in the tower still and asked them if they have any scraps of food. Just chuck it around the lawns and that for the ravens to pick in. Saves them, because obviously they was missing going through the bins. So one of the questions I get asked, what's the difference between a raven and a crow? And this really, they're a bit naked in this picture, but it shows the difference between the two, a common raven and a crow. Look at the size. The raven is much, much bigger than a crow in size. There are some other differences. The beak is different. They have different tail feathers at the back, and they're just bigger, and they make an awful sound. Like a crow makes a caw sign, and a raven makes a big croaking, deep croaking. And ravens have, depending on the environmental conditions that they live in, they can pick up sound from human sounds as well, so they can mimic, and they can pick up. If you go onto YouTube, you get ravens making sounds of washing machines and car horns and traffic light signals and all sorts of stuff. But as a general rule, they make sounds themselves. We estimate between 70 and 80 different calls that they can make themselves. And there have been some research stating that ravens actually talk themselves and have names for each other as well, believe it or not. And also perhaps even different dialects, depending on where they come in their environment as well. So they're very, very intelligent. So that's the difference between a crow and a raven. Size. It's really difficult to spot, even for me. Sometimes I'm looking in the distance and I need glasses nowadays. Is that a crow? Is that one of the ravens? Especially when they're on the rooftops, because they do fly here at the Tower of London. So I'm going to put this picture up because it's been floating around on social media for years. And every so often, this picture appears on social media with hashtag cute raven. It's a very, very cute bird, but it is not a raven, ladies and gentlemen. This is a cute raven. Not so cute, to be honest with you. So these are ravens that are a couple of days old, and they're beautiful, but they're not quite as cute as that one, are they? I think they are. I think they're lovely, and they grow up really, really fast. Now, these ravens are not our ravens. We have had a breeding program of ravens at the Tower of London now for the last 3 years. I did mention in the book right towards the end that I had aspirations to start a breeding program. Actually, I had already started that when the book went into publication, and we've been successful in 3 breeding programs. Our breeding ravens are in the moat, in a little quiet area there. And we've had 11 ravens to date that we've bred ourselves. We've kept a couple of them, but the majority of them have gone to live with friends of mine in the country. And they are birds that are wild, but are free to fly. So what I mean by that is they're not enclosed ravens. They are ravens that are imprinted to the environment that they're in. So their people feed them, but they are free to fly throughout their day, and they come back to their enclosures at night time, very much like ours are. But I would never, ever, ever give someone a raven who was going to keep it in any form of enclosure for any prolonged period of time. That is the wrong thing to do with ravens. They must be free to do whatever they want to do. So, cute little birdie, lovely ravens. These are our first clutch of ravens that we had in the nest. And this one here, this one is Georgie. And she is now at the Tower of London. She's grown up. So this is one of the first clutches of ravens that we ever had. Now, what I normally do with the ravens at the Tower of London, I let them fledge first in the nest until they've almost in flight. Within a day or two, I remove them from the nest. Then I take them home. I make sure that their health and safety is looked after. I make sure that I can feed them by hand. for a couple of days, and then I introduce them into the other ravens as quickly as possible. So they become a family straight away. So they are imprinted to a certain degree, but they're crash reared, so they are wild, or as wild as I possibly keep them, because I allow the ravens to fly here at the Tower of London. Now, if they were to fly away, then they wouldn't need humans to look after them. They'd be able to look after themselves. So that's how I do it. You can imprint on a raven and turn it into a human, which is the wrong thing to do, and it becomes really naughty. Ravens become quite difficult to look after if you print on them too much. So this was our first clutch of ravens. This is Poppy. The one in the front is Poppy. It was the first picture I ever took of Poppy. Poppy is one of our naughty ravens. She was one of my first ravens that I had. She lived with me at home for about a month. She has a fascination for feet. And she has a fascination for feet because she lived at home with me and my wife. And my wife had open toe sandals most of the time with red toenails. And she used to love to go and peck the red toenails. Now, she pecks everybody's feet who come to the Tower of London. So if you come to the Tower of London, Poppy's around, and you've got open toe sandals, run, because she's after your feet. But she's grown up lovely. Right, I've put this in. These are our two newest baby ravens before they were banded. These are, and so this was taken yesterday, no, 2 days ago. And so the one on the left that you look at it is Branwen. And we had this big publicity campaign to name a female raven at the Tower of London. And the name that we came up with, or the public come up with, I should say, is Branwen. And the one on the right-hand side, the grumpy looking one, and he's a bit of a monster, to be honest with you, he's huge and he's beautiful, is Edgar. And I got to name Edgar. I get to name most of the ravens, but Edgar is named after Edgar Allan Poe, of course, who was the writer and a poet. You know much more about him, you folk over in the US, because you have a raven over there that belonged to Charles Dickens in the Philadelphia Free Library. The raven over in the Philadelphia Free Library is called Grip. Now, Grip was a raven that Charles Dickens, one of our famous writers, had in the UK, and he used it in Barnaby Rudge. And in fact, he had 3 ravens called Grip, but one of them is over in the US. And I always wanted to go and see it, and then luckily I did get to go and see it. But Charles Dickens, we believe, was the inspiration for Edgar Allan Poe to write the poem Raven. So when he came over to the US, Baltimore, he met with Poe on 1 or 2 occasions, not many, and we believe that Poe was fascinated by Charles having a raven as a pet, and as a consequence of that, we believe, although there's no hard evidence, that the poem Raven, the Raven, was wrote because of it. And that's why I wanted to call one Edgar. I put this photograph in just purely because evolution has created this beautiful creature over the years, and they are dinosaurs. They are just smaller dinosaurs. You know, if you watch Jurassic Park and you see the raptors running around doing their things, I watch that every single day, and that's what ravens do. They gang up together, they hunt together. I see them doing pincer move and thinking about what they're doing and how they're gonna. I'll give you an example, if I may. I hope I'm not boring you too much, folks. But I'll give you an example. I was taking around a young lad who was in a wheelchair, and we sat watching Erin and Rocky. Actually, one day there was a whole group of school children sitting having their picnic, and it was not. It was Melina and Rocky at the time, and Melina was up a tree. And I said to this young lad, I said, I'm going to show you something now that's going to take place, and I'm going to talk you through it before it actually happens. And I said, Melina's up in the tree. I said, at the moment she's talking to Rocky, who's on the ground. I said, in a minute she's going to, and they're talking about food. That's what they're talking about. In a moment she's going to come down, she's going to go to Rocky, and they're going to have another chat. So she flew down. And she went down to Rocky, and they started having a chat. And I said, now what they're doing is they're talking about how they're going to steal that sandwich from that girl over there. And I'm sure as well, they went off. One went one side, one went the other. And they slowly but surely, without anybody noticing, moved further and further, closer in towards this child. And all of a sudden, one of them distracted the child, who turned around, and the other one went, stole a sandwich and ran off. They both ate it. And so they'd used their ability to go and confuse that child and steal a sandwich. And that's what they do. Yeah, fascinating. But I put this picture up because it just shows how beautiful their feet are made. Yes, you. I don't have this one anymore. I lost this raven. This is Melina. For those of you that have read the book and know about Melina on social media, I lost her just before Christmas, and we didn't actually announce that we'd lost her until after the New Year, because there were an awful lot of things happening in around the UK with COVID and all sorts of different things, and we just thought before Christmas it was too sad, and I didn't know whether she was going to come back or not. She just disappeared, and it was unlike her to disappear. I was her partner, and it was very unlike her to disappear. So we don't know to this day what happened to her. We put out a public message to everybody. I had 127 sightings, of which 4 of them I followed up. I've done many, many miles walking around London over a period of weeks looking for her. We said that she was missing, presumed dead, but what I think actually happened to her was either she got stuck somewhere, and I've searched absolutely everywhere for her, or she disappeared, or she flew off, or she was taken by a predator. So that's what we think happened to her, but we really aren't sure. There has been no trace of her whatsoever. I like to think that she just got fed up of living here and went off to live on her own, but I don't know. But I'd really like her to come back if she's around. I'm showing you a picture of an eye there. I'm lucky enough to be able to get really close to ravens and take photographs of them really closely. And their eyes are beautiful. They have a nictitating eyelid and stuff like that. And you can see really deep inside the eye. And you just know that they're looking at you and they're studying you and they're working you out and they're seeing whether you're friend or foe. And they're just soulful. Ah, there's me looking up into the sky going, where have all the ravens gone? Of course, many years ago, we would trim up their flight feathers, trim them all up, that's it, stop them from flying, make them unbalanced and stuff like that. And I write actually about it's a story about me climbing up the top of the White Tower and one of the ravens jumping off, and it crash landed into the floor. This was before I was Ravenmaster, and dying in my arms. It's quite a sad story, but I wanted to put it in there because it was from that period of time that I changed the method of how we done things. And I thought to myself, it'd be really nice if the ravens stayed at the Tower of London because they wanted to, rather than us forcing them to stay at the Tower of London. And so what I'd done over a period of years, and it was trial and error, and I didn't always get it right, and I still don't always get it right as well, is I encouraged them to stay at the Tower of London because they want to stay there rather than forcing them to stay there because of the myths and the legends. And so I allow their flight feathers to grow as much as I possibly can. Sometimes I do trim up their flight feathers, especially over the period that we've just had with COVID. I did have to do a bit of a trim on them because I wasn't around as much as I should have been, because obviously the tower was closed and stuff like that. So I have to be around all the time when I allow them to fly. But they've all grown back now, and so you'll see them on rooftops. You can see it was one of the ravens. You can see there's no trim up on any of the birds, which is great. It is difficult to do. I do ask them to stay at the Tower of London because they want to, because I feed them well. They don't have to stay, but they are very territorial. So they, unless something really upsets them, then they do have a tendency to stick around. I have lost them before, but it's very few and far between. So you can see nowadays, if you come to the Tower of London, you can see them on the rooftops, on the chimneys, up high, perhaps in the trees. So when you come there and you can't find any ravens, look up. In fact, one of the ravens, Poppy, when we were doing guided tours, we don't do guided tours at the moment because of the COVID issues. When we were doing guided tours, I'd have 100, perhaps 200 people in front of me. And if she was hungry in the afternoon, she'd swoop me and she'd fly down. And I could see her looking at us, and I'd go, I have to stop the tour and go, ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, we're all going to have to duck down because that raven up there is going to swoop us. And I'm sure that she'd swoop down, and I'd say, right, duck now. We'd all get down to past us, and off she'd go. And then she'd come back and swoop us again, waiting for me to chuck her out some biscuits. So it's lovely that they do that. It's really, really good that they do that. This was mooning. This was the only picture I had taken of her. She fell in love with that monkey up there. I talk about mooning and how she lost her partner. She was a nemesis of mine, actually. She had me climbing up every building in the Tower of London. I'm the only person who's ever climbed up to the top of the spire of the White Tower, trying to catch a confounded raven. This is the monkey that Moonin fell in love with. And it was a one-way conversation, obviously. But eventually I managed to break her away from that. And she then fell in love with another raven. And then I called her the Black Widow because she took so many ravens to their deaths. But she's not with us anymore. She died in 2018. She was aged 23. But she was a lovely raven. But she did give me a runaround. She did. There's one of our ravens in the evening time when the sun's setting. You can see it just sitting on top of the rooftop of the Queen's house. They are, of course, the guardians of the Tower of London. That's what they're here for. Charles II, one of the stories that we talk about, Charles II decreed that the raven should stay here. He came to see some work taking place after the restoration of the monarchy. And the royal astronomer at the time, man by the name of John Flamsteed, had a telescope. Lots and lots of ravens had settled and made the tower their home. They were interfering with his calculations. So he went down, so legend says, and asked the king if he could get rid of these confounded ravens. The king said, yes, of course you can. Until someone said, Squire, if you get rid of the ravens, the tower will crumble, and along yourself will perish. So he decided to keep 6 ravens by royal decree. We have a few more than 6 because it's been a bit of a dodgy year, to be honest with you. And so when you come to the Tower of London, we have signs around here in most languages. Caution, ravens bite, and they do. Look at the size of that beak, okay? Who would want to put their finger near a beak like that? Oh, you'll be surprised. Let me give you a little story, if I may. I don't want to go on too long. But this is what happens when a raven bites somebody. And it is only a nip, to be honest with you. And it's mainly small children, because mum and dad want their small child to have a photograph of a raven behind it. But the small child encroaches in the raven's space around a raven. And the raven pecks the child. And then mum and dad get very upset because the child's finger's hurting. And they go and find a yeoman warder. And all the yeoman warders have radios that we talk to each other on. And it normally has something like this. It goes, all stations, Tower of London, this is yeoman warder, such and such. There has been a small child here who has been bit by a raven. And what you don't realise that we all have earpieces in. And you can hear the people laughing in the earpieces after this child has been bit. So yes, we do care. Oh, I'm only joking with you. We do, but we do have. Don't put your finger near a raven's beak, okay? Ever, because they do bite. I've got scars all over me to prove it. In fact, Edgar the other day, I was putting a band on Edgar, and she bit my nipple, and that really, really hurts. Really hurts. So, yep, that's them pointing their direction out. Did you know ravens can point out food sources in flight as they're flying along? Ravens are left or right-handed, same as us, or left right-winged, and they have a dominant wing. And as they're flying along together, they can point out where food is to their partners. Pretty incredible, but true. Ravens are very playful. That's them pulling a glove apart, I think. But they do steal stuff off people. I had one lady one day who had brought her small child in a buggy in, and the small child had a toy. and one of the ravens decided it wanted to go and steal the toy. It did, stole the toy, run off onto Tower Green, and proceeded to peck this toy. The lady was very distraught that this toy had been stolen from this child, not because it was the child's toy. Oh no, it was the lady's toy, who she'd taken around with her all her life. And it would just so happen that the child was playing with it that day. And she came to one of the young warders and said, look, I want my toy back. I want my toy. But we said, madam, we can't take the toy away from the raven yet until it's got bored with it. Because if I go up and take the toy away, it will look like I'm taking food away from it. And it will remember that, because ravens have big memories. And then it will never forgive me. So we had to wait until this toy had been basically butchered by a raven. So I managed to pick it up, and you notice I got two hands, and there was a torso, and there was a head. And I went to the lady and said, I'm really sorry, madam, but I think there's been another execution on Tower Green. She was not happy, bless her. But no, you know, if you have anything that you want to keep, don't get near a raven with it. I had 6 gloves over the winter period, all odd gloves that Poppy had stolen. They are very, very playful. I put this picture up on social media some years ago now, and people said, oh, you're horrible, you chained them up. That's the raven playing with the chain. I didn't chain the raven up, okay? It does that because it loves playing with me. Yep, they're playful. They have sticks that they play with. They hide the stick and then get it out and play with it again. They roll on their backs. There's Erin rolling in the snow when we do have snow in London. There's Erin rolling down the bank playing it. There's lots of stuff on social media of ravens being very, very playful. We had one raven called Melina, used to play dead. She'd just roll on her back, stick her wings out, stick her feet in the air, and just stay there and watch everybody flapping that this raven had died. And then she'd jump up 10 minutes later and squawk around. In fact, the last raven that we had at the Tower of London that was called Edgar was in 1923. And Edgar, his name was Colonel Edgar Soper, and he was named after the person that provided the raven to us. And Edgar Soper, again, was a raven that played dead. And one day, so the story says, that he was playing dead outside the Queen's house, and the constable of the Tower of London at the time saw this raven laying dead on the grass and ran outside and went to tell somebody, went up to the raven first. And he actually went down to touch the raven, and the raven jumped up and bit his finger. So, yeah, I'm hoping that the new Edgar isn't quite so violent as that one. So that's Melina just rolling around, playing with sticks and scratching her nose and stuff like that. Yes, you, young lady. They are beautiful. They have so much characteristic. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's see if it works. Okay, do you have the sound? Does everybody have the sound? Put your hand up if you have the sound. You have the sound? Can you hear it at all? Okay. Right, this is Melina. I put this on social media some years ago now. This is her being affectionate to me. So I'm stroking her beak. They can feel you stroking their beak. And I stop stroking it, and you can see that she just gives me a little peck to say, carry on stroking. Incredible, incredible that she wants to share affection with me, which is, I think, is pretty amazing, to be honest with you. Yeah, very demanding.
You're demanding today, aren't you?
So obviously the ravens at the Tower of London, we make them work for a living. So we train them all to deliver leaflets. And we don't even have leaflets anymore. And this is, I put this up on social media some time ago as well. It is me listen to the raven purring like a cat. You can see its nictating eyelid going. Okay, not purring so much on that one, but they do purr. Yes, you. This might be the one. We had a knocking sound that we made to each other, which was like a confident sound that we made. So that sound. Ravens make sound quite a lot, but we used to do it to each other. And you can hear her purring. They're so affectionate when they want to be on their terms. Yep, that's her pointing out. Yeah, look, you're on there on the leaflet. But I do have another job at the Tower of London. Of course, I look after the Ravens. That's predominantly the job that I do. I have a team of 3 now, 4. I've just taken on a guy called Dave Coleman onto the team. So we're just training him up at the moment. I do have another job. We are tour guides at the Tower of London. We tell the stories of the Tower of London. We bring it to life as much as we possibly can. And we have ceremonial roles as well. We all dress up and look very smart. That's me on a state parade, I think, going to church. And there's me doing what I do best. There's a very young picture of me on the left-hand side. Oh, goodness me. Have I been that young? And slim as well. I'm not so slim nowadays. So we have different roles that we do, but predominantly I look after the Ravens. I've got to put this one in because it's something that lots of people have asked me about over the years. We had the poppies in the Moat 2014. Now, the poppies originally come from Canada, and then they came to England, and they commemorate those soldiers who lost their lives during the First World War. And so we had 888,246 ceramic poppies put in to the moat by people that come from all around the world as volunteers to put them in over a period of 4 months. And it was an absolute magnificent sight to see. But I put it in because one of the Ravens used to live outside. Many used to live outside, and she used to watch them putting in the poppies each day. But it was an incredible experience. And I kind of live, if you look at the wall on the right-hand side, right at the very top and around the corner is where I used to live. And there were so many people that come to see the poppy display that early in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, they used to turn on the floodlights when it was all done. And the whole place used to glow in red. And it was quite an eerie feeling. And through our arrow slits, all the light would beam into our bedrooms and living rooms, and all our houses were all glowed in a red glow. It was very, very strange and eerie, but at the same time quite comforting. And we used to go up onto a mound that was there every evening and read out the names of 180 people that had lost their lives, and it was a very, very emotional period of time. And of course, some of the Ravens sit outside watching the boats go by. They don't have to stay in the Tower of London. They can go outside if they want to. I don't encourage them to go outside, but I don't discourage them. I do like them to come in at night time, though, if I can. As a view of the poppies as well, the amount of people that came to see it, you can see it was an incredible experience for both those who lived and worked there, including our families, and for those who have lost loved ones in the Commonwealth throughout the world. It was a very emotional time. And there you can see that the redness of the poppies all around the moat. That was one of our first selfies that we had. I do lots of photography. I started doing social media stuff, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, several years ago, because I found that people from around the world had a story to tell about ravens. And culturally, wherever you come from, there's a raven integrated into stories and cultures around the world. And so I started putting stuff on social media, and it keeps me busy. But I still enjoy doing it. I'm very, very lucky in the fact that I get to meet lots of really lovely people. This person here is David Attenborough. He's an idol of mine. And actually, when you look at this photograph, I just want to say now, for the record, I am not photoshopped behind it. I was actually there in this photograph. We was doing Curious Creatures 2, and we was filming one evening. But it just looks like I've been photoshopped into the picture, like, oh, there's me. But I'm in awe of this gentleman. He has done more for nature than many, many people have done, and he's still doing it at the age of, I think he's 93. But he's an incredible guy for me, and I am inspired by what he and others do as well. There are some younger ones that do some incredible stuff as well. Okay. I do get to meet lots of people. For those of you that are in the US, you probably haven't seen this gentleman before. For those of you that are into it, I wasn't at the time when I met him. This is George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones. He's fascinated by ravens, of course, and he comes over quite often to see us, and we chat ravens. Of course, he used ravens in the majority of the books that he wrote. And we wanted the ravens to be good omens in the books rather than bad omens, and so he included them as messengers, which is fantastic. With 3 eyes, although I did tell him that he didn't have 3 eyes. Anyway, there's George R.R. Martin. But this is why I enjoy the ravens. This is what fascinates me. These children, one of them dressed up as a raven, the other one, looking at these ravens quite close up, I should say. But my whole job, and yes, I tell the stories of the ravens and the history and stuff, but I want to talk to people about how fascinating ravens are, intelligent they are, beautiful they are. And if I can get someone, I used to think it was the adults that needed the education. But it's children that we should. If we don't educate children, educate adults. Okay, not the other way around. That's what I'm trying to say. And I've worked out now that our future, our whole future here on this planet is here in these pictures. These children looking at this beautiful bird, and that's what I try to do. I'm inspired by young people wanting to look after the planet that we have now. I'm inspired by it, and good, because we blooming well need it. It's just little Max. He sent me a picture of myself. I look rather fine in here. So he enjoyed his day at the tower so much. He drew this wonderful picture of me. And this massive raven as well. I hope I never come across a raven that big in the picture, but it was fantastic. I loved it. Thank you, Max, for that. And through the ravens here at the Tower of London, I've inspired other people to draw, paint themselves, indeed, and pictures of ravens to make all sorts of. It's inspiration. It doesn't matter whether you like nature or ravens or whatever the reason for. If it's inspiration and creativity, then I love it, because I'm trying to get across that they can inspire people to do so much through just watching them. The lady on the right hand side, she won a national competition here in the UK, and she was inspired by the ravens of the Tower of London. And the picture on the left is actually hanging up by the side of me just here. This was by a lady called Henrietta Graham, and she was one of the first people to do an oil painting of me. And I wanted to show Melina sitting by the side of me, so that the connection between human and raven as well. But in the background, although that would never happen, but in the wild it does, ravens in flight, and they're fantastic tumblers and flyers, and you can just see me having connection with the ravens in the wild. So yeah, I hopefully try to inspire people to do creative things with thinking about the ravens. And I have so much artwork around my house here at the tower, which is fabulous. One day I think I'll probably have to do an art exhibition, tell the stories of the people that are inspired by the ravens. This was a cake. I still have it in my house here. It's a cake that was made for me for the book launch here in the UK. There was a base to it. I've eaten that. So, but this is a cake. Fantastic. All cake, I should say. These are just some of the pictures that have been drawn over the years that have, that show character. Actually, the one on the left-hand side is Melina, and I always thought she was a bit of a joker. That is tattooed on my leg. I have a fair few raven tattoos on me. I'm not going to get them out tonight, but she's tattooed on my leg, and the skulls at the bottom represent those who lost their lives at the Tower of London on the execution site. So she was the Joker monsters. But at the end of the day, it's just me and the ravens, and I am extremely lucky that I get to spend my time with these birds early in the morning and late in the evening, and just enjoy their magnificence. And I'm here for a few years yet, so hopefully that won't stop. Right, that is about me done with talking. Hopefully there'll be some people that want to ask me any questions. But thank you very much for listening to me. I did go on a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That was excellent. And thank you very for dealing with the technology delays. But there's been a couple of questions on the chat that I think that are worth talking about. Do the ravens are there natural predators that they have to deal with? And is there a veterinarian that takes care of them, or are you the veterinarian?
Yeah, of course. So we do have predators in the Tower of London. I over the years, I've tried to establish here. This is a large green space in London, and with the work that I've been doing with gardeners and the environmental people here at the Tower, we've included lots and lots of. I'll get on to the other bits in a minute. We've included lots more flowering type plants that haven't been here in the past, and we've included wild areas and stuff like that. So it brings in insects, which brings in smaller birds. So we're seeing a much more amount of wild songbirds coming into in here. We've had kestrels that have been breeding for 11 years here. We've had magpies and wrens and all sorts of birds that come in on a regular basis. So we are trying to get there. This green space is going to be used. And next year, watch out for something that we do next year in the moat, which is even more fabulous as well. So predators, yes, we do. We have foxes. And previously, before, I would trim up the flight feathers of the ravens and ground them, which didn't help because we have lost several ravens to foxes over the years. One I presented to Her Majesty the Queen, which was a bit embarrassing, telling Her Majesty the Queen that one of her ravens had been eaten by a fox. Anyway, long story. But so yes, we have foxes. So one of the reasons why I allowed the ravens to fly is so that they could fly away from the foxes should they come in. Now, previous to me, foxes that entered the Tower of London were caught and either exterminated or rehomed. Now you can't really rehome a fox anywhere because you're putting a fox into another territory of a fox and it doesn't work. So I stopped that. So I said no more. That's the absolutely wrong thing to do. Foxes have as much right to be in here. Urban foxes I'm talking about here have as much right to be in the Tower of London as any other creature. And we should not encourage them to come in, but not discourage them by trapping them and killing them. And so I allowed for foxes to come in. I have a fox cache that I put food out for foxes that they know that they can regularly go and get food should they require it. That stops them attacking my enclosures. And the ravens can now get up higher and fly around much more. We do have work that we've been doing for many, many years with London Zoological Society. They check the ravens regularly on a regular basis, and we look after them. They are the most pampered birds in this country, I think. And so I work alongside the vets at London Zoological Society, and they love working with the ravens, actually. Does that answer the question?
Do ravens ever get into scuffles with seagulls? And do ravens have senses of humor?
Yeah, absolutely they do. Very much so on both accounts. I was taking a lady around early one morning. Sometimes when people who don't want to come when there's crowds around, I take them in early in the morning, people perhaps who has a disability or whatever. And one morning I was taking this lady around and I just fed one of the ravens on Tower Green a piece of chicken. And I threw it out to the raven, and there was a seagull there and a crow, a piece of chicken, and the raven. So the seagull went and tried to get the chicken, and the raven jumped on the seagull's head and started pecking it. And you could hear this seagull squawking. Anyway, it got fed up with being pecked by a raven and flew off. And then, strangely enough, the crow decided to go and have a go at the chicken. And the raven looked at the crow and let him do it, which just shows that they saw it. The raven had seen this crow as not as much of a threat as the seagull was, because the seagull would have stolen the whole piece of chicken and flown off of it, but the crow would have pecked at it for a while, having not been able to fly because it was too big. Or did it see it as its own kind? But it's fascinating. I also saw two ravens once grab hold of a seagull. It was a young seagull at the time, who'd obviously been annoying them, grabbed hold of one wing and the other wing and was spinning it around. It was very, very funny to see. Not for the seagull, of course. But yes, so they do attack other birds, and I do see them attack pigeons on occasions. They can kill, strip, and eat a pigeon in 3.5 minutes. It's incredible to watch. Not for the pigeon, I might add, but for the actual, to see it happen. Incredible.
How did the ravens react to COVID because there was obviously no visitors?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me. They say, without the visitors being there, did you notice any change in the ravens? I did start off with, and there's two reasons. First of all, ravens are quite solitary creatures, and in the wild, you don't really see them around habitation unless they're a bit hungry. Sometimes they come in and will peck at your bins or come to your garden if there's lots of them around. But here at the Tower of London, they'd go through the bins. So when the tower was shut, we turned all the bins over. So they didn't have any food to go to. So they did have a tendency to the inner circuit where some people live to go and beg at their doors. So we stopped that by putting out food for them, or more food, or getting the residents to chuck out food. Ravens tolerate humans. So they didn't care whether there was people here or not. What they cared about was not being able to get their food source from their bins. So that's one of the reasons what I noticed. So we compensated for that by putting out toys and hiding food and stuff like that. But no, that they didn't worry about the raven, the people not being here. There was an excitement of the ravens when people started to come back in, but it was only short-lived for a day or so.
A question here from Jeanette. When I visited the tower many years ago at closing time, one of the ravens would not let about 4 of our tourists pass it to go out the gates. Is this normal guarding behavior on the raven's part?
That probably would have been, I don't know, about 4 years ago. Did you say about 4 years ago?
It's said several years ago. So
several years ago. It was either Poppy, who was waiting to be fed by me, or Melina, one of the two. It's not uncommon for them to do that, but what they're doing is they're not stopping you from leaving. They're just waiting for you to chuck them something down to feed them. That's what they're doing. But yeah, but they can be very territorial. If you get into their space, they'll let you know. They'll chase you around. We had one occasion once. We had one raven called Bran. He was a massive brute of a bird many years ago, and I was doing some filming, live TV. Actually, it was a US channel, CBS, I think, and the cameraman was filming. I was being interviewed, and this raven went around the back of this cameraman live on TV, and just whacked him straight in the shin with his beak. It was blood trickling down his leg. But what we could see was his camera moving up and down. This is raven to beat him. So it was, quite embarrassing. But yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to combine the next two because they're kind of related questions. Your work has done a great deal. Your work has done a great deal to educate and raise awareness about the ravens. What is the next step to reach even further? A continuation of the current routine? And do any bird researchers study the bird ravens, the tower ravens?
Yeah, yes. We've had Queen Mary University, one of our universities here, studying, the students come in and study the ravens on a regular basis. Obviously, with COVID happening, that's not happened over the last year and a half. I'm hoping that they get enough funding to come back and do it again. We've been looking at cognitive behavior now for 5 years. So we do use them as a study tool for students to learn in an environment, although it's not a natural environment, it is semi, because they're semi-wild. and we've been looking at reactive responses to mirrors and all sorts of stuff. And there will be some papers out on them. There's an excellent book actually called Bird Brain to Feathered Ape by a guy called Nathan Emery. And he is the one of the main men in this country who's been, him and his wife actually, who study raven cognitive behavior. Actually, he studies primates, but he does ravens as well. And he wrote a brilliant book about cognitive behavior of ravens and crows and scrub jays and stuff like that. So yes, we do use them for educational tools, and I do as much as I can with that. In the future, obviously, I've done pretty well as much as I can with the Tower of London. I brought out the book because I wanted to push as far as I could how ravens are intelligent and have personalities, and they're little monkeys. They really are. Scientific study over the last couple of years has come on in leaps and bounds, looking at cognitive behavior of all sorts of animals. But in ravens particularly, people like John Marsef and stuff like that have been looking at cognitive behavior for a long, long time. And, Bernhard Heinrich is my Bible, really, when it comes to the study of ravens. He does it an infinitely more than I do. I mean, I am purely an observationist. I look at the birds and observe them. So I'm not a scientist or an ornithologist. I study them by looking at them. And for right or wrong reasons, I see what I see. That's what I do. In the future, I don't quite know what I'll be doing from here. We have done the breeding program now. This is the last time that we'll be breeding ravens at the Tower of London. But so that we only had 3 years to do that with. So they're going to go out and live in the countryside and still continue on doing what they do, the ravens, but they won't be here. And so in the future, I think I'm going to be developing my social media sites to look more at environment and nature alongside the ravens as well, because obviously I have the tower behind me and my bosses that tell me what to do. Although the sites that I do are private sites, they're not connected to the Tower of London, they all are private. And I do have a free reign of what I can say on social media, although predominantly I talk about the ravens and the ravens here at the Tower of London. But I will be looking more in depth about ravens throughout the world. I'm desperately trying to get a documentary together where I go around the world looking at ravens in different cultures and seeing how they've affected different cultures throughout the world, throughout history. That's something that I've been passionate about getting together in the future. But that all comes down to funding and stuff like that. But I'm working on it. Maybe you'll see me doing that. Yeah.
Are ravens sensitive to light, and how do you handle things like fireworks or loud noises?
They are sensitive to light. I know they see colors in different spectrum to what we do. I think I'm aware it's similar to what dogs see. So they do see colors differently. Raven eyesight is, as far as we're aware, fairly good, but not as good as a lot of birds. They have a tendency to look at larger prey and predators making their way towards food sources. So, there is connection with ravens following other predators like wolves into a kill. And they work alongside wolves. I mentioned that particularly because they know where the kill is going. They are, as far as I'm aware, not sensitive to light, although if you went from a dark room to a very bright place, you can see them blinking and adjusting their sights to it. With reference to noises and fireworks, I haven't seen them be too phased with it. Obviously, we have the gun salutes that take place at the Tower of London. We do have a raven here that was taxidermist, and the story about the taxidermist raven here is Blackjack. His name is Blackjack, and apparently he fell out of a tree and died of a heart attack back in 1852 when the Duke of Wellington's cortege went past when he was buried with the gun salute. We have 11 gun salutes here a year, and I've never seen a raven even flinch, really. The nearest we've got to that was Melina used to sit outside and listen to the guns, and when they went off, she'd just flap away. But no, I don't think they are sensitive too much to noise, although I haven't noticed it.
And one last question before we let you, you've had a long day. You mentioned about a documentary. Is there another book in the works?
I'd like to. I was, to be honest with you folks, I never had an intention of writing the Ravenmaster, and I was kind of coerced a little bit by a publication house, publicists in the US. Actually, it first came out in the US, and it's lovely. It's fantastic. I love writing children's books for children, obviously about ravens. I haven't published any of them as yet, but maybe in future I will do. As to whether I write up a follow-up of this one, I would like to. I have a lot more stories to tell and a lot more lighter side of stuff that I do as well. I think eventually when I leave the tower, which is not for a few years yet, I would like to write a more specific book on the history of the Ravens of the Tower of London. During my period of writing this, I done a lot of research and a lot of really interesting stories came to light. But that narrows down my field of play for people. And the tower, of course, they have the copyright of this book. And we wanted it to be much more generic so everybody could read it and feel part of it. But if I narrow it down to just history, then it's just really for people who enjoy ravens and that such like. So it might be a project that I do later on. Yes, I'd love to bring out some of the children's stories that I've wrote. That's something I'm working over the next couple of years. As to whether I write a book of this in some depth, maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, I'll put pen to paper again and talk about it. But who knows? Who knows what comes up? I want to do some documentary stuff if I possibly can in the future.
Well, Christopher, thank you for taking the time today. This has been great. I greatly appreciate this, and so
my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. This has been wonderful. And
if anybody wants to ask me anything else at all from tonight, go on to Messenger on Facebook or Twitter, and I'll answer any questions that you have that we haven't answered already for you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Chris. Good night, and have a great, wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good day. Or good evening.